Thank you. Today is Thursday, September 21st, 2023. It is 3:01 p.m. We're in council chambers. I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. If you could read the motion.
Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of Greater Madawaska calls to order the September 21st, 2023 regular council meeting at 3:01 p.m.
Do we have a mover? Councillor and Councillor Popke. All in favor? So carried. Please stand for O Canada. As we gather in chambers, I would like to acknowledge on behalf of council, our community, that we are meeting on unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We would like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history. Excuse me. We are extremely grateful for their many and continued displays of friendship. We would like to thank all generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Thank you, Big Witch. 2.09.1 approval of the agenda, additions, deletions. Can you read the motion, please?
That the agenda of the council meeting of September 21st, 2023 be approved as presented.
Do we have a mover? Councilor Levesque, second by Councilor Tripp. All in favor? As unanimous, so carried. 3.09.1 approval of minutes. If you could read the resolution, please.
Be it resolved that the following minutes are approved by council. August 17th, 2023 regular meeting, August 30th, 2023 special meeting, August 31st, 2023 special meeting, September 7th, 2023 special meeting, September 13th, 2023 special meeting.
Do we have a mover? Councilor Tripp, centered, second by Councilor Popke. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Section 3.09.2, accept of the minutes. Could you please read the resolution, please?
Be it resolved that the following minutes are accepted by council. July 5th, 2023, Madawaska Street Docks Committee.
Do we have a mover? Councilor Thompson, second, Councilor Popke. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Do we have any declaration of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? There is none seen, thank you. Section 6.09.1, disposal of assets. Oh, facilities, sorry, I skipped over one. It was 5.09.1, facilities and environment department. If you could, who is taking the lead on that one? Leonard, thank you.
Yes, Mayor. So this is a memo to council just to inform them that this year I have some extra money, not extra money, but surplus from the grinding. We're going to try the chipping of the brush this year to see how it goes. And from year to year, it'll be based on budget restraints. If our budget gets too tight, then we have the option of burning if we have to. So in this memo, it does state that it is nicer to chip it. We get away from having to deal with the smoke and the ashes at the end of the season. And it's less stress on staff and equipment that can be used elsewhere. So yeah, so it's hopefully, and then the price came in at fairly decent. I was quite surprised. And with this, the company is chipping it and hauling it to their own site, so then it won't fill up our landfill site either.
Perfect.
So,
Thank you. Any questions from council?
I just want to
Councillor
say,
Thompson?
I'm sorry, through you, Mayor. I just want to say that I think it's fantastic because I think it's a bad thing to be spewing into the environment if we can do it differently. I know it still takes fuel and to run the chipper, but anyhow, I appreciate that. That's good.
Thank you. Any other questions? None? Thank you, Leonard. We'll move on now to section 6.09.1, disposal of assets. And Steve, I think this is for you.
Yes, I'm looking for a recommendation that council direct myself to dispose of a 2013 International Tandem dump truck. We ordered a tandem dump truck back in August of 2021, and we just received it in June of this year to replace this truck. So now this is a surplus truck we'd like to sell to get rid of. We will be putting it up for public tender for a certain amount of time, and then the highest bidder will get it. I guess that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Can you read the resolution, please?
That council directs the Public Works Supervisor to dispose of the 2013 International Tandem Dump Truck as per policy 4-06 asset disposal.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Councillor Tripp, second. Councillor Levesque. And I apologize. The recommendation should have been read first and then the background. So I went out of order in that, and I caught myself on that. So I apologize. Might have caught you off guard too, Steve. So all in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Thank you. Section 6.09.2, policy to road to be assumed by municipalities. Please read the recommendation in the motion.
That council approves policy 6-02 road to be assumed by municipality as attached herein.
Do we have a mover? Councillor Levesque, second by Councillor Popke, and background, please, Steve.
So policy 6-02 roads to be assumed by municipality was passed by council in October 1st, 2014. So just reading through this policy provides standards to ensure that the roads to be assumed by the township develop are acceptable standards. After reading through this and noticing some of the changes we've had to make to some of these roads over the years, that's why we've kind of read through, and that's why we've done this. So the discussion, as the policy has not been revised since 2014, we have updated standards based on the current acceptable standards. The purpose changes are listed below. So during the section 8 of culverts, I noticed that it had driveway entrance culverts will be a minimum of 400 millimeters as required to handle the 2-year storm. The only thing I added was because of our entrance permits, we have in there that it's mandatory for a 9-meter length. So I thought it'd be good to have it in this as well, so that all the entrances being developed will have the 9-meter length that's expected. Section 14, the turnarounds. So over the years, we've been redoing some of these roads that have been developed and noticed that we're having a real hard time turning around our snow plows. They're very small. So we up the size of the actual radius of the asphalt portion. But that being said, now that we've upped that, we'll need a little bit more of the property around the outside as well. So that's why we upped it to 30 meters for the property around the cul-de-sac radius. And I thought maybe it was important too, they add section, this is a whole new section, section 16, environmental impacts. Just to make sure that all the silt fencing and the proper stuff is done while they're being constructed.
Thank you. Any questions from council? I have one question, Steve. I just need some clarity on this. Under section 14.1 and 14.2, in 14.1, it says the road surface at the end of the cul-de-sac shall have a minimum radius of 20 meters. And then in 14.2, recommended road allowance at the end of the cul-de-sac should have a minimum radius of 30 meters.
So the 14.1 was the original that was in the roads to be assumed bylaw. This is 14.2 is what we want to change it to.
Okay. Yeah,
But
it just reads funny to me.
sorry, so, but they're different. So there's one that's the road surface. So you're removing road surface from 15 mils to 20. And then you're adjusting road allowance, like the radius around the road allowance from 20 to 30.
Okay,
The shoulder. And
thank
the
you.
ridge.
That clarifies it for me. Any other questions from council? No? All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. We now move on to section 7.09.1, Fire Chief Response Vehicle Update.
So as per the memo, supplied to council, we need
Is your mic on? Thank you.
As per the memo to council, we're going to need some more time to develop that audit on 100% of the assets across the department with regards to vehicles and whatnot. So that'll be proposed at a later date at this point in time.
Thank you. Any questions from council? None seen. If we can move on to section 7.09.2, Fire Department Statistical Information, please. Chief?
Furthermore to last council meeting with regards to statistics, currently you can see in the documented audit that I provided to council at this point in time, everything was moved on a yearly basis. I went back 5 years and did a 5-year audit. Unfortunately, as you can see in the last column, all I could obtain was up until August of this year. So clearly everything is broadcasted from 2019 forward yearly up to August of 2023. Currently, if you scroll to the bottom of the document, you can clearly see that at the very bottom, the last line is calls to all the calls were based up into August across the very last line from 2019 forward to 2023. 24 in 2019, 34 in 2020, 40 in 2021, and 47 in 2022, and 32 to date. Actually, there's 36 to date. We've had 4 more calls. So currently, that's what's on the market for calls. And my projection is mid-50s for the end of the year with 3 months remaining. That brings us to a 3% deficit across the 5 years. If you were to take the average of the 5 years, would be 35. And the calls to date would be 32, which would give us a 3% deficit between the two numbers. So currently that's everything that we have responded to, and even a little bit outside the box of the newer calls that are coming out to date, that are coming out in the market.
Thank you. Any questions from council? None seen. Thank you for that, Chief. We now move on to section 8, Planning and Building Department. 8.09.1, bylaw 542023. Could you please read the recommendation?
That council approves bylaw 54-2023 to lift part lot control from part of Block 3, Plan 49M-102, designated as Part 1 on Plan 49R-20343, and part of Block 1, Plan 49M-101, designated as Parts 1 to 10 on Plan 49R-20383.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Counselor Levesque, second by Counselor Tripp. Background, please. Is it Eric, you providing this with?
Yes, I'd be glad to. I don't know, am I audible? Hello, testing?
Hello?
Yeah,
Yep,
you're good to go, Eric.
you're good to go.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, so this is with respect to Calabogie Peaks, the Juniper Ridge project. So as council will be aware, there is a 97-unit residential development proposed for the Juniper Ridge portion of the peaks. Site plan approval was issued earlier this year for those units. It covers the extent of the project. And so it'll move forward to construction. And part of this, in order to get financing to get started in construction, there is a requirement that the lands be conveyed to a separate holding company. And it's a bit of a technical detail, but essentially financing related to this project is not desired. The owner doesn't want to encumber the entirety of the resort very clearly with this particular development proposal. This is common practice. And so this application will effectively sever the extent of the Juniper Ridge lands from the rest of the ski hill and resort. That'll enable the owner to secure the appropriate financing and enter into the appropriate partnerships to move this project forward. So it's called a part lot control bylaw. It functions very similar to a severance or consent application, except in this case, the lands are within a registered plan of subdivision, 2 of them actually. And so the process that is taken to sever land and convey it is the part lot control process. So once council, if council deems it appropriate to pass this bylaw, it'll then go to the county for approval, and the bylaw will be able to be registered along with the transfer of the lands to the appropriate entity. I might just make one clarification and revision to the draft bylaw for council's consideration, if I may. And that would be under, if I could just draw council's attention to the attached draft, and it should be the first attachment to the report under section 2C. And I'd just like to tidy up that wording a little bit. It's pretty standard wording, but because conventionally these bylaws are used to convey land to end users, so owners of individual dwelling units. In this case, it's a little bit different. So I'd like to broaden the scope of C to read something along the lines of any easements, including rights of way, as contained in the transfers to the purchaser. And if we could just just simplify it and broaden it, because we're not talking about a conveyance to purchasers of a dwelling unit at this point. This is transfer to a separate corporation. So that would just be one item of clarification. Madam Clerk, if we could make that change. Thank you.
Thank you. Defer to our clerk on this. Do we need a motion to make that change? And voted on?
I would say yes. Perhaps it can be added into the motion that we're doing, like add an end.
Okay.
And remove these words, or end read 2C to B.
Okay. And do we need Eric to repeat what he said, or?
I can adjust from what Eric just said.
Okay. So I guess we should reread the resolution then with that, the following information.
That the council approves bylaw 54-2023 to lift part lot control from part of Block 3, Plan 49M-102, designated as Part 1 on Plan 49R-20343, and part of Block 1, Plan 49M-101, designated as Parts 1 to 10 on Plan 49R-200383, and that bylaw 54-2023 as presented is adjusted in section 2C to read as any easement, including rights of way as contained in the transfer to the purchasers of each individual dwelling unit.
Eric, Eric, was that correct that dwelling unit was still to be left in?
No, let's remove it. So the wording should be any easements, including rights of way as contained in the transfers to the owner. Or to the purchaser. To the purchaser, thank you. Yes.
Perfect.
I am
Yep.
not going to ask you to read through that entire resolution again, however, it would be fun. Do we have we'll have to have this, a mover and a seconder again. Mover, Councillor Tripp. Second, Councillor Thompson. As per the change resolution, all in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. We now move on to section 8.09.2, bylaw 55-2023, approval of expropriation drainage easements. If you could please read the motion.
That council adopt bylaw 55-2023, being a bylaw to approve the making of an application pursuant to section 4 of the Expropriations Act for approval to expropriate lands that are required for purposes of municipal drainage.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Councillor Tripp, second. Councillor Popke. Background, please.
This is the next step of the expropriation process for the drainage easement, and we do have Emma Blanchard here to explain more of the next steps. You can take it over, Emma.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Can I be heard well? The audio is okay? All right, thanks very much, Council. So this is the second time we're back discussing this expropriation process, and the background to all of this is reflected in the report. But in a nutshell, these easements are with respect to ditches, swales, culverts that are specifically related to taking drainage off the roads within this subdivision. There's a very long history on this file. So this subdivision was developed many years ago, and because the roads were never brought up to municipal standards, and because drainage wasn't fully established in accordance with the requirements that the municipality had, the road was never assumed by the municipality. So it had to be privately maintained by the owners in that subdivision. And this has been a sort of a long-standing, ongoing issue in the township. So a concerted effort was made several years ago to try to get to the point where that road would be brought up to a standard where it actually could be assumed by the township. And one of the key features of that program is establishing legal drainage for the road. So a reference plan was prepared to describe those drainage requirements, and efforts were undertaken over a course of several years to try to get those easements conveyed by the owners in that subdivision. And, you know, there were various people involved in trying to make that happen over the years, different lawyers, different realtors, you know, a lot of people spent a lot of time trying to get those easements conveyed. There were residents in that subdivision who came up to scratch and conveyed the easements. And we have several of those registered now on title. This expropriation covers the remaining easements that were not capable of being conveyed. There were a number of reasons for that. So some people weren't able to get consent from their mortgagees or mortgagors to register the easement on title. There are all sorts of reasons, but the long and short of it is this expropriation covers the remaining easements that are required to have that drainage infrastructure legally established for the benefit of the municipality as part of this larger program to see that road brought up to municipal standards. When this matter was back before council, council was asked to consider and ultimately adopted a bylaw approving the initiation of the expropriation process. So the expropriation process is a very specific process that requires rounds of public notification, etc., before you can actually proceed to expropriate land. So the first bylaw was to authorize that public notification process to occur. That bylaw was passed and the public notification did happen with publication in the newspaper and service of notices by registered mail. There were a few responses from some of the people who were served, and I think Mr. Inwood and others at the municipality were able to answer some of the questions that people had about whether there was some kind of new drainage work being constructed, et cetera. That's not the case. As I understand it, these are effectively existing ditches that are now just being legalized through the easements. So that public notification process has occurred. And in order to now proceed with the expropriation of these remaining easements, it's necessary for an additional bylaw of council to be passed to authorize staff and the township to finish the expropriation process, which effectively, there's many steps to that really, but step one would be registering the expropriation plan, which is the document that actually results in the conveyances of easements to the municipality. And then after that, there's a series of notices that go out to property owners. The first one being a notice of expropriation, giving them a copy of the expropriation plan. There are a few other statutory forms of notice that need to go out in terms of valuation dates, which I'll come back to in a minute. And basically you follow a very strict process that's set out in the Expropriations Act. Once that's happened, the last piece of the puzzle is that the township must make what we call a statutory offer, which is an offer of compensation that is required under the Expropriations Act. It has to be supported by an appraisal. So a certified appraiser needs to prepare an appraisal estimating the cost of the easement. So this is how much it's worth to actually put an easement on the land. That work is underway. We don't have appraisals yet, but ultimately what would happen if this bylaw were to pass is the appraisal would be received and ultimately an offer of compensation based on that appraisal would be made to each of the owners where an easement has been expropriated. So what you're looking at here is effectively a bylaw that would authorize the rest of the expropriations process to be completed. So I'm open to answering questions. I think, you know, I have some idea of the questions that might be asked. I'm happy to speak to any of those, and I'm in your hands, Council.
Thank you very much. Any questions from council? Councilor Tripp?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, and thank you for the background. It's very helpful. So there's been a series of phone calls and emails back and forth over the last few days from some of the residents in Peaks Village who have granted and had easement on title. They've been working on this and internally since 2018 to collect that sense of community willingness to move forward. And there were 5, I believe. There was some transition of property and ownership during that period, but initially everybody was online or heading in that direction, and there was some confusion when these other 5 units were sold. But the concern now, and I understand the Expropriation Act in Section 25 and the application of the offer of compensation, but there's a bit of an inequality between these 5 and those that have stood fast from the beginning saying, yes, we'll comply and allow and have registered. And then those that have brought us to this point will get compensated for their land. I'm not sure the process, and I don't think it applies to the bylaw, but perhaps there's a discussion or a direction to staff when they're doing the audit or the review for compensation or the appraisal, would it be customary to also apply that process to the other owners that have complied, so that we would have an idea of what their land value was, and then internally find a way to compensate so that it's a fair, equitable distribution across the village? Not sure if that is a question.
I'm happy to speak to that, Councillor, and I understand the issue that you're raising and that some have expressed. So I guess as a starting point, I would say that, you know, the end game here is not a bunch of drainage easements, right? I mean, what is the ultimate objective is to get to a point where the township can assist with the maintenance of that road. And that is what everyone has been driving at for many years. So we've got these 5 holdouts who are not prepared to grant easements. Without those easements, we don't have a chain. We don't have a complete drainage course for the road. So certainly the expropriation is a last resort. In terms of the actual offers, as I say, we have not yet received an appraisal. The Act is very clear that it is absolutely required legally to make an offer which includes the market value of the taking, which in this case is an easement, and any injurious affection. Now, at the end of the day, we're talking about an easement. So we're not talking about the value. We're not buying land. We're not paying 100 cents on the dollar for the square footage that is going to be encumbered by that easement. It's going to be some, you know, discounted percentage of that. And we're talking about a ditch which I understand is already in existence. So, you know, I say all that to say I'm not expecting a major windfall for the 5 holdouts, but there are realities to this expropriation process. And ultimately, all of the residents in that subdivision will benefit from what is happening here, which is the municipality going to significant lengths to do things for the benefit of that subdivision, which should have been done by the initial developer. So, you know, I can understand that there might be some consternation that these 5 holdouts will somehow get some sort of windfall at the end of the day. But, you know, I think, you know, my comment back would be, let's keep our eye on the prize, right? What we're trying to do here is address matters which should have been addressed by the developer when this project was built out. And we're trying to get to a point where, you know, in a modern context, like these easements would have been conveyed upon registration of the plan of subdivision. So, you know, we're doing a project of trying to get there. It's not about what we end up having to pay by law to these people who will have easements registered on existing ditches. I hope that's helpful. I think probably going much further on the topic in open council is not ideal.
Follow up, Council Tripp.
Thank you, and thank you for that. So just a supplemental, I agree. I think we need to keep our eye on the prize, and that's to bring this to conclusion and to get the easements registered so that we can start doing the work on the roads and helping the entire village. So I'm not suggesting it becomes part of it at a formal level. I'm suggesting we may want to consider when we're doing, and even the appraisal is a little ways down the road. That's not something that's starting tomorrow, but when or is it starting tomorrow?
It's already started.
Oh, okay.
From my understanding.
That then the appraisal also, if we could, I'm assuming all of the land is going to be relatively close in terms of the square foot cost. And I agree, it's not a full market assessment. It's going to be significantly less and not a large windfall. But if we could apply the appraisal also to those who were in compliance it gives us an opportunity. We don't want to disturb or slow this process down. I think it needs to go ahead with expropriation. But as a parallel, I think we are behooved to find some way to reach out to those who have been standing behind this process from day one and applied, brought everybody into application, and then had 5 at the end of the day step out. There's just a bit of an injustice, I think, and it's from the phone calls I've been receiving and the emails. It's not about the money, it's not the value, because they realize it's not a windfall. It's about the principle of fairness, that they took the initiative and they've been driving this. It's a bit of a point of frustration that by legislation, and they recognize that we would be applying a fee. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tripp. I greatly appreciate the input and the comments. And I think it's something that we would take a look at after next steps. But at this present time, I'd like to move, have a vote on this bylaw and resolution. And we've had a bit of discussion since the resolution has been read. Does any of the council need the resolution read again to understand it, or any other questions?
Just one question. The properties that are all on title, are we required to do anything beyond what's been done with those properties in relation to what Councillor Tripp has indicated? So in other words, are we only, part of this process, are we only obligated to assess the value of the properties that are going to be expropriated as opposed to the other properties that are already on title?
Thank you very much, Councillor, through you, Mr. Mayor. The Act requires the appraisal to be with respect to the specific expropriated interest. So we will receive 5 appraisals for the 5 properties where an easement has been expropriated. But, you know, I think Councillor Tripp's point is well taken, in that those 5 appraisals will likely contain a unit rate and a discount for an easement that is not dissimilar across the subdivision, because the properties are quite similar in many respects. So, you know, it would likely give you a directional idea of what the value of those easements are, if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? None seen at this time. Do we need the resolution read again by anybody, or is every Councillor Tripp?
Do we need, so voting on this, and Councillor Levesque's question was really good. The delta is not going to be large. The act is just to make an appraisal on these 5. Do we need, or can we make a motion within this motion to direct staff at the same time that the appraisals are going on to also consider an appraisal, or do we just apply the direction that we get to those at a different date?
My suggestion is that we vote on this resolution the way it is. And it's been duly noted by staff that what you're talking about and what the residents would like. And I don't think that we'd actually need a motion on it, that we can address it once we get the numbers from the assessment. We can then work towards a resolution and at another time. But I think it's important to separate the two, because as our council has said, that the expropriation is very legislated and needs to be done in a certain way, and I wouldn't want to muddy the waters up. I would like to keep it as per the legislation.
Thank you very much. I fully agree. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. And nobody, I'll ask third time, does anybody need the resolution read again? No, none seen. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. I thank you for your time, Council.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Council.
Give me 1 second here, just catch my screen up. We now move on to 8.09.3, bylaw 2023 swimming pool bylaw. If you could read the motion, please.
That council approve bylaw 51-2023 being a bylaw to regulate the fencing, care, and operation of privately owned swimming pools as presented. And furthermore, that council repeals bylaw 42-2023 swimming pool bylaw.
Do we have a mover? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Hopkey second. Can we have background, please? Chris, you will be supplying that for us today?
So yeah, this is just a revision or an amendment made to the previous pool bylaw that was passed, I believe in the August council meeting. At that time, it was discussed that a section for infinity pools be added to the bylaw. So I did a little bit of research on that, and as you can see in the new bylaw, we've added a section number 4 for infinity pools, and I believe that that's the only new portion of the bylaw. Other than what was previously passed, that would be the only change to it.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Councillor Tripp?
More of a comment, and it's overarching, I think, to all of the reports by staff. I'm really impressed with how well the relationship is developed between council and staff, and when reports come to us and we have a look at them and ask for second consideration, I'm quite appreciative of the work you did to look at the infinity, but it also talks as well to the report presented by the fire chief today and also from roads as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge your work and thank you for a quick turnaround on this, and for the other reports as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, concerns by council? No. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Thank you, Chris. And we are now over to section 9.09.1, bylaw 53-2023, agreement with MVCA for category 2 and 3 service. If you could read the recommendation, please.
That council approve bylaw 53-2023 being a bylaw to authorize the township to enter into a 5-year agreement for programs and services with Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority.
Do we have a mover? Councillor Thompson, second. Councillor Levesque. Background, please.
So we have at the June council meeting on June 20th, Sally, who's attending today, attended the meeting and presented to council the agreement for category 2 and 3 programs and services. So this is the agreement to enter into these services. The financial impact additional to what we already pay is $7 by entering into this agreement. And that this is, the agreement process is newer to us. However, this service has been offered with the exception of that $7. And I don't know if Sally, you want to add anything to that?
No, this is, it is an administrative process that the province has asked us to go through with our member municipalities. So we're basically papering over programs and services we've already been delivering for many years.
Thank you. Any question from council? Councillor Levesque.
Thanks for attending. Just some questions around, I guess, what you've done in the past for the Greater Madawaska, and if we have any specific statistics around what's been done that would be relative to the township.
Okay, so most recently, you'll be familiar with perhaps with Bill 23 that mandated that for those municipalities that are within the jurisdiction of conservation authorities, we used to do natural system reviews of your planning applications. We're mandated by law, we have to deliver reviews of your planning applications because we have delegated authority from the province to do so for natural hazard. So any planning applications in your jurisdiction that have the potential to impact natural hazards have to, by law, be circulated to us, and we do those reviews. So with Bill 23 coming in, it actually reduced the scope of what those reviews contained. And so we provided your staff and all the planning staff in our jurisdiction with guidelines and other documents to help them, and so that they could understand what their newly assumed responsibilities would be. And of course, we're always available to staff on a day in, day out basis. If they have questions regarding natural hazards and land conservation matters. I don't have specific numbers for the number of residents who have signed up for any of our stewardship programs, but certainly they're all eligible for them, those within our jurisdiction. So that would include tree planting, shoreline restoration work, if they had wetland work they wanted to do on their properties, etc. So sorry, I don't have the exact numbers for Greater Madawaska, but you are in the upper watershed of the Clyde River, which drains into the Mississippi. And right now we're doing floodplain mapping on the Clyde River. And we're going to be embarking on further study of the Clyde in the next 6 months, looking at how we can optimize control of the Clyde. Outside your jurisdiction, but not by far, is the Widow Lake Dam. And that controls some of the water in the upper watershed, including, in the Greater Madawaska area.
So with regard to the watershed areas, I know something's been reported to me that a request was sent to MVCA and it was outside the jurisdiction of the watershed. So, it's certainly not questioning the work that's in the package. It's the real question around the value to Greater Madawaska and how much we get for what we're paying. And that's really the question that I have. And it's hard for me to assess. I see what's in the report, and actually quite a bit of it goes toward the maintenance of Milliken Tail, for instance, which I don't know if people take advantage of from the township, and it's difficult for us to even know if that's even known to people. So the real question for me is, like, how do we assess and go forward with a vote if we don't really know for sure what we're getting for the value?
So I can say that just generally, the way the Conservation Authority model works is based upon assessment value. So Greater Madawaska, in relative terms, has the least assessment value, and it's one of the smaller jurisdictions. So by virtue of it being a low populated area and a small area relative to the entire watershed, you would naturally expect that the scope or the amount of service you receive is not great. And for that reason, you pay very little. So our annual budget exceeds $3 million, and Greater Madawaska pays just over 1,000. So, I think that you need to put it in perspective that we're the equivalent of a county type organization. That's how we function. It's a multi-jurisdictional organization that's funded by people according to, quite frankly, their needs and means, right? Your small population, small area, limited means, and that's reflected in your levy.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yeah, I just point out that our levy for this is 0.03 of the entire, I think the city of Ottawa is at 90 for their levy. So we have a very, very small portion of the levy itself as well. So thank you. Any other questions from council? Councilor Beck?
Just to point on that, I totally agree. It's very small. But if you compare that with taking the same amount of money and putting it toward the food bank or some other place that our residents could greater benefit from, that's the question on the table that I have. So,
thank you. Any further questions, comments, concerns? Councillor Thompson?
In order to protect a watershed, the whole thing has to be protected, and putting $1,000 to the headwaters does a service to our residents and everyone downstream. So I think it's an important $1,000 to spend. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns from the council? Does the recommendation need to be read again, or are we good? Okay. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Have a good meeting.
Thank you, Chris. 9.09.2, 10-year long-range capital forecast, 2024, 2033. If you could read the recommendation, please.
That council endorse the 10-year long-range capital forecast as presented.
Do we have a mover? Councillor Thompson? Sorry, Councillor Levesque? And please provide the background.
So in 2022, as you know, we passed the Township's more robust asset management plan, an asset replacement strategy, which includes we use a new software that allows us to really track the assets and strategies. In September of 2022, we presented our first 10-year capital requirements. This was just based off of the asset management plan. This was our first step at putting projects together and really starting to move them as per the asset management plan strategy. At the time, we discussed, I would have presented an update and really talk about bringing in growth-related projects and talking eventually about financial strategies around moving these projects forward. So what we have today is the updated 10-year long-range capital forecast to include years 2024 to 2033. There's a bit of information in this report regarding asset assessment. Some of it comes from our financial software, which is built off of assessing assets based off probability of failure, which is the condition of the asset, and consequence of failure, so financial, social, economic, and department. So these two components provide a percentage of assessment for assets within our system. So you could see there's this condition base here where it goes from very good, from the 80 to 100% of service life remaining, all the way down to 0 to 20% with very poor. And then to add to that, we have, in November of 2021, we completed a street scan for the roads. So this assessment is like a Google card that goes around and assesses all roads. And so our roads, paved roads assets are all assessed based off this review. So what we have is, in this report, I've highlighted assets that have moved. I thought that we're going to start building off of this capital asset plan and just moving as we drop a year and bring in the additional year, making movements. So you could see here we have the buildings. We started bringing in some development charge buildings. These are additions. There's sometimes additions that are very clear, sometimes provisions for additions. So development charge study has provisional items just to plan for possible additions required to buildings, equipment, all of these items. So we'll start bringing those in. And then we did have, as we start fine-tuning the capital projects, you'll start seeing more items like we see here, the Calabogie garage, windows and doors. So it's less of the whole replacement of the buildings and then maybe more maintenance pieces that need to come forward. You see this again for the Calabogie Community Hall and Griffith Community Hall. Again, smaller items, the pressure washer moved over. We have bleachers that are moved up due to deterioration. And the thing is with these types of things, such as we talk about this bleachers at the Calabogie Ball Diamond, there's items that may have not been used in the past are being used more now. And so you'll see movement with assets in that way too, where we could have said we moved it along in the past because it's not used, but asset is deteriorating. The bigger components of changes you'll see is down to on paved roads. So the attachment has these roads where we put arrows to kind of demonstrate where we started and where we moved them to better track. As you can see here, we have conditions. Again, these conditions are based off of the street scan. And they're only a component of the assessment, right? So what we've done is we've moved some of the projects over, the roads projects over off from 2024 and off to 25 in 2026. The main reason for that is that we do have big roads such as Madawaska Road coming through that require a lot more capacity. So this will be one of these, I guess, reasonings why we'll be moving projects as we move forward. We do capital projects mostly in-house. This costs, it may cost up to 2 times higher to contract services for roads. So if we're able, for the township to be able to financially replace roads, we do them in-house, uses human capital to do that. So roads are moved in that manner. So I explain that a bit. We do talk about Hydro Dam Road, which is also a road that was identified as part of the street scan. So the big roads for us that were identified street scan as being red, which is very poor, were Ferguson Lake Road, Madawaska Road, and Hydro Dam Road. Ferguson Lake Road has been completed since then. We're working our way down to Madawaska Road and then Hydro Dam Road. And then I do talk about here a bit about unpaved roads. We've had conversations about it in June in regards to our asset management plan, referring to unpaved roads as being, it's quoted in here as gravel roads undergo perpetual operating and maintenance activities, that they're basically included in the operating budget. This, again, the statement is if maintained properly, they can theoretically have a limitless service life. Up to now, we've had just a smaller portion of gravel budget within the operating budget. We've discussed with other municipalities, we're not dissimilar to other municipalities. With that said, there's an opportunity now. The province has put out with Street Scan has updated their process, and now they do gravel road condition assessments. So going into the new year, we'll be looking at completing a gravel road condition assessment. This would allow us to do the same thing that we've done with our roads, is add them as ID like numbers within our asset management plan. As you can see, these other items already have ID numbers, and then we're able to assess them. Maybe they'll be, I'm assuming they would be assessing based on how much base of gravel is left and how much is on. This will allow us to develop a maintenance plan for these types of roads. Moving on to the vehicles, we do have a tanker here that had been split within the last capital forecast to 2024. We're proposing 2025 at this time. As the fire chief has mentioned, we're undergoing a bit of a review on requirements. So it'll be moved with the intent on reviewing this, and then coming back to council with the overall fire plan. And then the other item would be a public works vehicle. It was being replaced in 2029. This is well over the years of service that they normally recommend. It's moved down to 2025. Other than that, what we're doing today is we're looking for council to endorse the plan. The 2024 column would essentially become part of the capital budget for 2024. And then we're able to, as we fine tune this long-range plan, we'll be able to use it going into 2025, 2026, and we have a bit of an expectation of how it unfolds. And I'm ready to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Councillor Thompson?
I'd asked you about the library. It's as the school grows, or the capacity will shrink. So you gave me an answer to that, and I'd like everyone to know what you told me.
Yeah, so the question was relating to library space. Currently, it's not included in our long-range capital forecast, but it's more around that piece of, so it falls under the development charge study. So our development charge study, and you'll see more projects come in here in regards to that. We do collect for the library board. So we collect for the library space, we'll be collecting over time $50,000. There may be this type of additional growth, revenue collected to development charges will offer opportunities for for the library to be able to use it to expand space, and look at other options such as multi-purpose buildings and working as a contribution towards those types of things.
Thank you. Supplemental?
Oh, no, another question.
We'll go with that too.
Okay. The other piece was the boat launches. I'd asked you why they aren't on the asset management plan, and
So we currently have 2 boat launches included. So I just want to back up a bit. The long-range capital forecast that's provided here only includes assets for those 10 years. So there's more assets. Our system has more assets. If they're not due to replacement, they just don't list here. So you'll run into that component where they're not included, not because they're not within their assets, but they're just not up for replacement. There is work being completed for the Barnett boat launch this year, in addition. And then we purchased land last year for a boat launch in Griffith. With that said, we're reviewing the boat launches, and then we talked also about trails, beaches. These are expansions to the asset management plan. So over time, as we fine tune the asset management plan, you'll see these components come in here more. You see again the development charge items coming in. So it's to make it more of a robust asset management plan to incorporate everything, all of our assets essentially.
Thank you. Councillor Popke.
I'm just curious about these roads. How do you decide an order on which road you're going to fix up first? Like here, according to this list, like roads like Jim Wallace Road, Kennedy Road, things like that are scheduled for 24 or 26? 26. And then Graphite Bay Road, which I think is in worse shape like than those, it has, there's a 2028 and a 2026. So they're all listed as like poor, and I get that, but some of them are in worse shape than others. So how do you decide which one you're gonna fix up?
So we
Turn your mic on, please. Thank you.
So normally what we'll do, so we have some of these in for 2006, or 2026, sorry. But like when it comes time to get to that year, the year before, when we're working on 2024 now, we will assess them as well. So like if we have to move, say Jim Wallace to 226 or to 27 and move Graphite Bay up, we will. Like all roads, we put them in here as a plan, but when it comes down to them, I'm seeing them where they're fine, and then one will blow out, like just the way the frost might come out of that road that year. It's just, okay, we need to do something with this one. It's the same as Hydro Dam Road, like we've moved it, but the scan proves that poor, but we don't do there's no potholes coming to it. It's all really badly cracked, but it's not blowing apart. It's there, it's still being maintained. There's very little holes. So we're not going to do that one right away. We're going to kind of push it off and get it our lifespan we can. So it's the same thing we've already moved it. I've seen it was on Graphite Bay, was way down like 2028 or 9. We moved it up to 26. But we got to remember we have a whole bunch of other roads like Madawaska Road and stuff that we got to get ahead of too. So that was the reason for that one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think too that the idea of the plan is it's a guideline to say, here's the roads we need to look at in this time period, but we can adjust. But it's this way so it doesn't fall off the radar, right? If I'm interpreting that correctly. Yes, thank you.
Can I just add to that? When it comes to replacement of assets, we're still in a backlog in a reactive state. We do have a $1.5 million annual gap for capital assets. So over time, there would be less movement of this. It's almost like we don't have a choice but to move and progress year to year where, like Steve mentioned, if there's frost or something that deteriorates the road faster, we reassess and we move them around. Over time, as we continue to increase the contribution for capital by that 1.6% in our plan, that we'll be able to meet, you can see the bottom line of all these projects, it's like between 1.5 and 2 million. Over time, we'll be able to annually just meet the requirements and not make adjustments to our plan.
Certainly. Go ahead, Steve.
So maybe it should be mentioned too, like we've just started in the last year. You're going to see roads like Bluff Point over here. It's not in as crazy state as Graphite Bay, but we're going to put it on the asset management plan to put one layer of surface treatment over it, because we got to start doing some catches, like to put one layer of surface treatment on this road to extend the life of that road. Because if we don't catch it at a point where we can do that, well, then we have to pulverize that whole road. We have to add gravel. So we've already done chunks of flat road and Mount St. Patrick Road this past year. We put another layer over top of what was already there, just to hold that road so we can get some more time to get caught up on these roads that are getting bad. So we just started doing that. We're getting that into the loop as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Levesque?
So just on that point, and I talked with our CAO on this, the current standard, the road standards bylaw, which we just looked at, and I think you just updated recently, doesn't really speak to the criteria in which to move roads from one category to another. So from gravel to LCB, from LCB to HL4. So that doesn't include cul-de-sacs, so we know where they stand. But there's a number of roads here that are going from LCB to HL4, including what you just said about Bluff Point Road. So what I'd like to see is a criteria in that bylaw that kind of outlines that, like how do you get a road from one to the other, because there's a lot of roads that people are very sensitive to that are currently gravel, and we know there's a few of them out there. And the question people might have is, well, why does this road go LCB and this one doesn't? So, you know, it could be everything from whatever criteria you define as, you know, number of cars, number of residences, you name it. But we have to be able to answer to those, I think, to residents when they come and ask why this road got upgraded and this one didn't.
We have not done any upgrades though from a gravel road to an LCB road. We're just redoing LCB roads and upgrading from LCB to asphalt. We haven't done any upgrades from, like, since I started here, we've never went ahead and brought a gravel road up to a standard and made it LCB. We've only done roads that have already been either LCB or asphalt or upgraded from LCB to asphalt. And previous council and a previous road super had brought that he thought that the roads that we have moved to HL4 should be brought up to a standard because the LCB wasn't lasting. The truck traffic or log trucks, we redo it within 6 years. And that would put us behind again on the asset management plan, because now we have to go and do that busier road before we're getting to these roads. So that was the reasoning why they upgraded those.
Like, all I'm suggesting is that we apply that in the bylaw so that it's clear about how roads are defined and how they graduate from one to the other. That's all I'm suggesting, because there's a whole lot of stuff in that bylaw, but that's the piece that's not there. It's just a suggestion. Okay.
CAO?
Yeah, and I agree. It's over time. I mean, Steve just explained it perfectly, where you have a road that you probably wouldn't normally replace every 10 or 15 years, but if you're replacing every 6 years, you're probably going to upgrade it. So over time, we could have a guideline that better allows us to assess those situations, or at least puts the guideline within a policy that says these are the things we look at, so that they could be considered when questions regarding upgrading roads.
Thank you. Anything further? Councillor Tripp?
Very briefly, and just to the reverse of that, there are some roads where the residents want them to remain as a gravel road. Peaks Village is a good example. They're concerned, as we move through the process that we've just come through, they want to maintain that village feel, that village look. So their interest is in not having an upgraded road. I mean, moving it from its current state to something that's a little bit more usable, but they're not looking for a paved road. They want that village feel to still be there. So in the policy as well, it's not an automatic consideration for upgrade. It's recognizing where we can, those pockets of the community that want to remain as they are. And that ski village has that certain nuance to it. They're not a subdivision in Canada. They're not a new division that's coming in. It's been there forever. They want to maintain that feel. So it's a complicated thing to write, but thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
I agree with that completely. When I saw Frontenac Road on this form, I thought, I knew it had just been done not long ago. So I thought, no, don't be paving. I freaked out in email form. And then I was calmed down. And that's why I'm happy to get that explanation of why you're putting the second layer over what was already done, is to preserve that, because I know it was a lot of work. But yeah, it's important for the people, for you to find a way to include that it's not an automatic thing to upgrade. Anyhow, just
Thank
wanted
you.
to mention that.
Any other questions, concerns, or comments from council? There are none seen. Does anybody need the recommendation read again? No? All in favor? That is unanimous. So carried. We now move on to 9.09.3, organizational charts. Please read the recommendation.
That council approve the Township of Greater Madawaska organizational chart as attached herein.
Do we have a mover? Councillor Tripp, Councillor Levesque to second. Background, please.
The intent of this motion is to, well, essentially approve the organizational chart. There has been some adjustments over the past year, and we do require, I guess, a chart that is functional based off of what we have. I have highlighted in the discussion section some of the changes. As per the budget process, council had approved proceeding with a position that would do some economic development type of work, maybe some marketing. I've pegged it at this point as a community development coordinator position, which would do communications, marketing, business retention, attraction, and tourism. So essentially right now I would call it more of a placeholder for us to fulfill and move forward with this within the chart, and then maybe adjusted as need maybe. The other changes included are the adjustment from, we used to have a part-time fire chief and a part-time deputy fire chief. We've moved to a full-time fire chief. And then the most recent change would be the adjustment from the CAO/clerk position to CAO and clerk position. So the clerk was adjusted, or deputy clerk was adjusted to clerk. Essentially, the only newer adjustment that hasn't come forward to council would be the deputy clerk piece to clerk. This is a financial implication of $5,000, which would be included within the budget for 2023. And then, yeah, so the chart is attached, and I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from council? Councillor Levesque?
Thank you, CAO. Just a question on the community development coordinator. Did we talk about, when we first talked about this, a part of the recreation piece being part of that?
Yeah, so initially we talked about that. At this point, what I'm looking forward is a position that fulfills the needs of the more high level economic development, marketing, communications piece. And then the plan, which would come as part of the 2024 budget, essentially would be the opportunity to partially fill the recreation piece within staff we already have. So there is a consideration to have that opportunity. So if council is okay with this at this point, we'll be moving forward to, in the next few months, into other options to consider recreation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, concerns, comments from council? No? Okay. Don't think we need the recommendation read again. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. 9.09.4, cost of living allowance, or COLA. If you could read the recommendation, please.
The council endorses a cost of living adjustment practice, whereas the compensation grid be adjusted annually based on the June 12-month average of the Consumer Price Index for Ontario all items as determined by Statistics Canada, and that this adjustment will not be lower than 1%, and that a compensation grid policy be brought forward to council for consideration.
Do we have a mover? Councillor Thompson, second. Councillor Tripp. Background, please.
So what we have is annually, there is an adjustment to the salary grid based off the cost of living adjustment, which I'll be referring to as COLA. So what the township has always done is follow the practice of the county. The county would adopt their adjustment for COLA, and we would follow. Background a bit, the county essentially would follow the non-union collective agreement. So recently, the County of Renfrew has adopted a directive that's more straightforward, and it's included here. It's similar to the recommendation I've provided. So I've provided a chart to kind of demonstrate what that looks like compared to increases that the township has done over the years. And as you can see, with the exception of 2023 and 2024, which they were abnormal years, this directive kind of aligns with the COLA increases we've had while not following a directive. So what I'm looking for is just a way for us to be able to, one, increase salaries with not just following, the County of Renfrew, but following something that's bigger like the CPI. And then with the county and neighboring municipalities adopting these policies, not aligning with them would would increase the gap with compensation. And, with that comes retention, recruitment, all these other concerns. But more or less, when developing the budget, the treasurer has the ability to know where they start. The increase is essentially not approved until the budget's approved, but it allows a guideline to develop a budget, and then moving from that, seeing where affordability really is and how does that sit. Some of our neighboring municipalities, actually 3 of them, use CPI October year over year. This has been, adopted by 3 municipalities. The difference there is that they're not doing an average over the year. They're basically saying October this year compared to October the month last year. This is the difference between this average that the county is adopting. For comparison purposes, we compared to that same methodology when passing COLA last year, where we said some of these municipalities are increasing at 6.9%. However, if you compare to this new methodology, we would have been comparing to 5.7%. It's quite different. So the intent here is to at least have a process, a guideline for our development of the budget, and then assessing as we move forward.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Councillor Levesque?
So just to recap on that, so it would just be part of the budget process to have this preloaded as part of that?
Yes.
Rather than a separate approval?
Yes,
like we did last year?
Yes, that is correct. So in prior years, we would have council approve COLA separately from the budget. This would provide a directive. And then also, as we move into next month, we'll be doing our first real directive. It would, in our budget directive where council endorses. So this would be included in it. So annually, we would have, what we just talked about, asset management plan, the 1.6%. COLA as per the guideline. We'd be able to come to council before a budget presentation and say, these are the items that we all agree that should be included. So this is further allowing us to manage and prepare for budget.
Any other questions from council? It's going to provide a lot more ease of forecasting for budgets going forward. I think that's great. Letting us know where we are, having a base point on it. So I think that's wonderful. Any other questions, concerns? Okay. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. We now move to 9.09.5, short-term accommodations. Please read the lengthy recommendation, please. Just once.
That council receive the draft bylaw to license, regulate, and govern short-term rental accommodations for information purposes, and that council direct staff to engage the community and residents with a short-term accommodation survey to be posted on the township's website to receive community feedback on short-term rental accommodations, and that council directs staff to schedule a public meeting to receive comments from members of the public and those currently operating short-term accommodations on the proposed regulations and draft bylaw, and that council directs staff to report back to council with a process and licensing system to regulate short-term accommodations in the township to be brought to council for consideration.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Councillor Tripp, second. Councillor Popke. Background, please.
Over the years, there's been quite an increase in tourism within the township. This has resulted in an increase of accommodations. I mean, so the increase in tourism, there's increase in accommodation, and throughout the election and the public meetings and open houses for the zoning bylaw, we've received lots of complaints and concerns relating to short-term rentals. This included safety, parking, noise, and then in requesting options for enforcement. There are two options for, just a second. Yeah, there are two options for enforcement that were considered. One that's currently in our draft zoning bylaw. There's some wording there around short-term accommodations. And then the other one is licensing or registration of short-term accommodations. So what we have is I've attached a draft bylaw that is being the concept of it is being used across the province. So it's maybe a bit generic. It has some demerit points for certain items for short-term accommodations and not meeting the requirements. So the intent of proceeding with this type of guideline is to allow the township to know where these short-term accommodations are located. And then ensure that they're following all applicable, health and safety standards, the building code, fire code, and all municipal policies. We have worked with, discussed with a company, it's called Granicus. It does tracking for short-term rentals. They were able to do a scan, which was completed in June of 2023. And they identified 207 active short-term rentals in the area. With that, you could see, and I don't have it here, there'd be a mapping a bit of assessing. We've talked to other municipalities, Kawartha Lakes was one of them, where when they did their assessment, they were told they had 1 to 200, I believe, and ended up with 600 by the time they were fully with Granicus, because then they start identifying them. There's more that register. So the intent here is to explore the opportunity to have a license, and the license essentially says that you've been registered with the township and you meet all the requirements to be a licensed short-term rental. With that, these companies that are out there, such as Granicus, have the ability to shut down these short-term rentals if they don't meet these requirements. So they have the ability to not allow them to post online and close them down. So when you have a bylaw in place, they hold some sort of requirement or standard, I guess. So at this time, all we're looking for is for council to endorse the concept of the bylaw. This bylaw is similar to our draft zoning bylaw, where there will be adjustments based off comments. This will allow staff and council to seek input from the residents through survey, as well as a public meeting. And then from that, we would bring it back to council, and then with options on licensing fee and how would this roll out.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns? Councillor Thompson?
So you're not looking for comments from us now on this? We just want to say, should we go forward with figuring it out? Okay, thank you.
Yes, and as we move through it, council can send comments for adjustments that have been identified, and then we'll keep moving through that process with compiling all the questions coming from the public.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Levesque?
Just one question. It says schedule a meeting. So is the intent to have one meeting somewhere in the township, or is that a misprint?
I guess it says a meeting, not intentional to be a meeting. So the intent would be to, I guess it would be up to council if, I think we should have public meetings depending on the outcome. So I am up for options. So right now I have I've assumed the fact that we'd have an open or a public meeting.
Okay, the reason I'm just asking on behalf of the other wards,
Yeah.
There could be requirements for that as well.
Councillor Tripp?
If there's if we can leave it the way it is and just let our CEO take that initiative, if we need to put it in the formal motion, we could just amend it to say schedule public meetings. And that would capture the other wards, but we're just getting smashed now.
Hang on. Okay, are you finished, Councillor Tripp? Okay, Councillor Thompson?
Or public consultation, or something that's more general without saying the form.
Excuse me. Councillor Levesque, did you have a follow-up? Okay. Just in reading it myself, when that caught me about a meeting, but I don't think that restricts us from having more meetings, but at least we have it in there that we're having a meeting, and it'll be up to the CAO and her staff to figure out do we need several meetings? Do we need one in each ward? Do we need, so I think we can leave the resolution as it is right now, with the understanding that we have very competent staff and they will know what to do. Councillor Popke?
If we are gonna be planning like a future meeting, on behalf of all the other wards, can we avoid hunting season? Because
Good point.
that's like the moose hunt's coming up the end of October and the deer hunt's mid-November, so it's a big one.
Thank you. I don't think it'll be moving along that quickly, but that will be taken into consideration. Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments at this time? All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Okay, we are at, I'm losing my papers here, sorry. We are at 10.09.1, enter into closed session. Recommendations? Before we have everybody move, let's have our vote first, please. I know you want to get home.
That the council meeting of September 21st, 2023 enter into closed session at 4:29 PM pursuant to section 293(2) of the Municipal Act regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal and local board employees, specifically 2024 Canada Day Committee, and litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, specifically Causeway.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Councillor Thompson, second. Councillor Popke. I think we just need to vote on that. All in favor to move into close? That is unanimous, so carried. We are entered into close, I think. Thank you. I move to section 11, open session, 11.09.1, move to open. Please read the resolution.
That the council meeting of September 21st, 2023 move back into open session at 5:19 PM.
Motion. Mover, Councillor Thompson. Second, Councillor Popke. All in favor to move into open? That is unanimous, so carried. Okay, 12.09.1. Please read the motion.
That council reports the following as a result of the closed meeting item. Personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, specifically 2024 Canada Day Committee discussion item. Litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, specifically Causeway, proceed as directed and closed.
Do we have a mover? Councillor Levesque, seconder. Councillor Popke, all in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Now, you will be moving. To the motion. We'll need to, pardon me? Yeah, that's. Going to bring forward a motion that resolved out of the closed session, discussion session. If you could read the resolution, please.
That council approve the appointment of the following members of the public to the 2024 Canada Day Committee: Jane Weir, Jean Libby, Leslie Cassidy, Emily Thompson, and Kate Zale. And furthermore, council appoints Councillor Tripp as council representative on the committee.
Thank you. Mover? Councillor Thompson, seconder, Councillor Popke. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Tripp, and all our volunteers. 13.09.1, bylaw approval. Motion, please.
Be it resolved that the following bylaws, 51-2023 swimming pool bylaw, 53-2023 agreement with MVCA for category 2 and 3 services, 54-2023 lifting of part lot control, 55-2023 approval to expropriate drainage easements be deemed read a second and final time and passed by council. And furthermore, that 56-2023 confirmatory be deemed read a first, second, and final time and passed by council at the regular council meeting held September 21st, 2023.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Councillor Levesque, second by Councillor Tripp. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. And now we'll get to Councillor Thompson's favorite part, 14, adjournment, 14.09.1, motion to adjourn. Please read the resolution.
That the regular council meeting of September 21st, 2023 be adjourned at 5:22 PM.
Do we have a mover? Councillor Thompson, seconder. Councillor Levesque, all in favor? That is unanimous. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all for your time. Thank you.